We usually don't have the big room, so we're grateful for that. But I do want to welcome everyone today and to thank you for being here, those who were in the audience and those who were providing testimony. I'm delighted that Senator Mike Braun of Indiana will serve as the new ranking member of the committee. He's been not only a member of the committee, but a very diligent member. He's been to a lot of hearings, and we're grateful for that and grateful for his work as ranking member. I wanted to start as well by welcoming new members of the committee, and as many of you know, at these committee hearings, especially on a Thursday, where we often have our hearings, people are in and out. Members are going to multiple hearings. I was almost much later for this hearing because I had to testify briefly at a hearing on the derailment in Ohio that affected Pennsylvania as well. So you'll see senators that will come in and out. But we have three new members of the committee who are also new members of the Senate. Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, Senator Pete Ricketts of Nebraska, and Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania. So we're grateful for their membership of the committee and look forward to working with them and their contributions over the next 2 years. And as many of you know, the Aging Committee has historically been a committee that fosters both bipartisanship and collaboration as we examine difficult issues facing so many older Americans. And as I continue as chairman, I hope to continue the same spirit of bipartisanship and advance an agenda to build both health and economic security for seniors, people with disabilities, and their families. Today's hearing will discuss the caregiving workforce, both paid and unpaid, and those who are providing so-called, as the acronym, like everything in Washington has an acronym, HCBS, Home and Community-Based Services. And so important to focus on that. The United States is in the midst right now of a caregiving crisis. There's no other way to describe it. And home and community-based services are not only important, but they're not readily available for those who need them. We got to change that. We have a lot of work to do to accomplish that. In a new report just released last week, Anchor and the United Cerebral Palsy found that 63% of home care providers have discontinued services or programs because of staffing shortages. 83% of service providers reported turning away families because they don't have the staff to provide the services. The report also found that 92% of service providers are struggling to meet quality standards because of lack of staffing. 92% of service providers having a staffing problem. When it comes to the staff who are providing this critical, backbreaking work, home care workers often struggle to support their own families because they're paid an average of just $19,000 per year. This workforce, the majority of whom are women of color, are more likely to live in poverty than the general public. Many work only for their wages and have few or no benefits, including paid leave or even sick leave. It's time we make the smart economic choice for the country to help our families, to invest in our families, to invest in caregivers, and strengthen this workforce by making a generational investment in home care services. That's why in January I reintroduced with 39 co-sponsors the Better Care, Better Jobs Act. It's Senate Bill 100. It should be easy to remember that. This bill focuses on home and community-based services, and I want to describe what those are. Some people have a general sense of it. Here's what we're talking about when we talk about so-called HCBS. A variety of medical and human services that enable older adults and people with disabilities who need assistance to live in their own homes or in a home-like setting and remain part of their communities instead of living in an institutional setting. Now, most institutional settings do a really good job, and people can get really good care there. But Americans should have another option, and most Americans do not have that other option. Home and community-based services can include the following: assistance with the activities of daily living, home health care, of course, physical and occupational therapy, skilled nursing care, like you receive in an institutional setting like a nursing home, Home meal deliveries can be part of this, transportation, and so much more. This bill, the Better Care, Better Jobs bill, is an investment in better jobs for home care workers, better care for seniors and people with disabilities, and better support for family caregivers. More than 50 million Americans provide help for their families every day of the week. This investment is about services. It's also about turning poverty jobs into family supporting jobs. It's about creating a workforce that is paid a living wage so that home care workers do not need to work 60 hours a week, 70 hours a week, 80 hours a week just to feed their families. It's about creating a workforce that's professionalized and respected so that we can recruit and retain the workers to provide more of these critical services. This investment is how we begin to address the healthcare workforce shortages that we've spoken about to support American families. It's also about supporting family caregivers, as I mentioned before, who are often unrecognized and unpaid caregivers, providing support every day to their loved ones. As we know, the overwhelming majority of people with disabilities and older adults want to live and remain in their own homes. We need to ensure that families have a real choice when it comes to the supports and services that their loved ones need. So that's why I'll also be introducing today the HCBS Access Act, so that everyone eligible for Medicaid long-term care services and supports will have the ability to choose home care and remain in their communities without fear of being put on a long waiting list. So the Better Care, Better Jobs Act and the HCBS Access Act are complementary. The first one is an investment to create a robust HCBS provider infrastructure for the recruitment and retention, of workers. The second bill establishes a permanent funding stream to keep the infrastructure strong and make sure that we're able to continue to pay direct care professionals at a rate that ensures qualified, reliable services and a qualified, reliable workforce into the future. The HCBS Access Act also creates real choice for individuals and families to be able to choose between home care supports and institutional care. Taken together, these bills will revitalize the caregiving workforce and create sustained changes for home and community-based services. We should pass these common sense bills so families don't have to face difficult decisions about how to care for a loved one. We as a nation must come together to address the needs of the workforce that will help us care for those who need support. So I look forward to hearing from our witnesses about the need to create a strong to create and sustain a strong home care workforce. And now I turn to Ranking Member Braun for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Chairman Casey. He is correct. This is a committee that, in the time I've been here, we have covered more terrain. We really can't legislate through it, but we can talk about a lot of issues. And it is one where I think, especially as it relates to all of us that will be there someday in that aging category, and so many things that we do as a federal government, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, take a much broader discussion than what we have here today. It needs to be fixed. It needs to be saved. And I come from the world of where I've run stuff before I got to the Senate for 37 years, and no other place quite works like this place. And I've never seen so many, a place where so many people look to it and depend upon it. So that's always a factor as we look at what we're going to do, try to do it more efficiently, more cost effectively. On the committee, as a business owner, my priority was to have healthy employees. I took on healthcare in general many years ago and did some things entrepreneurially, like turning my employees into healthcare consumers, asking them to own their own well-being. So when they get in that elderly category, they can enjoy life and not be, riddled with having to fight healthcare issues. The old ounce of prevention being worth a pound of cure goes a long way. And when it comes to like reforming Medicaid to support, Senator Casey was talking about it, home-based care. That is important. It's probably a way that if you get that right, you get the workforce training, kind of orienting in that direction, you can save money and maybe do it more efficiently. Community-based services, I think, are going to gain stride and become more important each year we get down the trail. Not only for Hoosiers, but for folks across the country, that dynamic, I think, is going to be in play, and we need to make sure we get it right. Now 1 in 5 Americans, 1 in 5 is a family caregiver. I mean, that's a big number. When you take 20% of 330 million, that's a lot of people that probably are not going to be really ready to go when that time comes, and we got to get better at it to make that work. Got one example, Cornerstone Lutheran Church in Carmel, Indiana. Decades ago, members of this church recognized the need to support family caregivers, so they established what they called a friendship group. Now, friendship groups have grown across the state, helping family caregivers know where to turn for support. I think that's important. Whenever we can do it from the grassroots up, it's probably going to be done a little better, and it's probably going to be more cost-effective too. Federal policies should support family caregivers. The administration's proposed independent contractor rule will hurt caregivers, in my opinion, by restricting the independent work and the flexibility it offers. 74% of independent workers say they prefer the arrangement because it gives them flexibility to be one of those 1 in 5 of all Americans that are going to be caregivers eventually. Women who make up the majority of caregivers will be disproportionately harmed by restricting independent contracting. That's a whole other issue we have to deal with, make sure that dovetails into what we're trying to accomplish here. Inflation is still high and widespread. It's not going to go away anytime soon. It impacts all of us as we try to recruit and retain new employees, including caregiver employees. The Better Care, Better Jobs Act, which was talked about earlier, I think is going to maybe add to inflation. So sometimes we do things here, even though well-intended, might be counterproductive. The federal government wants to rebalance spending on long-term services and supports from institutional care to home-based services. Rebalancing means shifting weight from one side to the other. It doesn't mean putting more weight or more burden on trying to do it, so we have to be careful there. I introduced the Bipartisan Jobs Act with Senator Kaine to expand Pell Grant eligibility to shorter-term job training programs. I think that's going to be a win-win. I hope Senator Casey joins us on that. I think that's got a good chance of making it through this Congress. I also reintroduced the Prioritizing Evidence for Workforce Development Act to fund education and workforce programs with proven outcomes. I think that's important. This bill would help scale successful programs like the Goodwill Excel Center, which helps adults earn their high school diplomas and provides training so they can enter the high-demand, high-wage fields. In our state of Indiana, 135,000 jobs need a better high school education. We export 4-year degrees in our state. Our guidance counselors at many schools do not even tell kids about jobs like will be needed, for caregiving in the home. We also need to make sure that the wages are there, so it's attractive for people to get into fields. This needs to all be guided. It needs to be promoted. And kids coming out of high school, regardless of what your trajectory is, doctor, astronaut, plumber, electrician, anything in between, need the skills that we seemed to not be delivering. And it would really come into play when it comes to what we're talking about here today. So as long as I'm here, I'm going to push that from this level. Don't dismiss what can be done in your own states. A lot of times where the laboratory of finding things that work and you can pay for actually occur. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Braun, for your opening remarks, and grateful for the work you're doing as ranking member. I want to start with our witnesses. What I'll do is introduce each of you, and then we'll start with testimony. But I'll introduce each of you first, and I apologize in advance for the brevity of our introduction, because that doesn't, of course, capture all the work that each of you does. But I want to start with our first witness, Dr. Kezia Scales. Dr. Scales is Vice President of Research and Evaluation at the Paraprofessional Health Care Institute, or PHI. For nearly 15 years, Dr. Scales has been studying person-centered, high-quality long-term care with a focus on direct care workers. So thank you, Dr. Scales. I'll now turn next to Ranking Member Braun to introduce our second witness.
My pleasure to introduce Dr. Hannah Maxey, Associate Professor of Family Medicine and Director of the Bowen Center for Health, Workforce Research and Policy at Indiana University School of Medicine. She is a nationally recognized expert in health workforce policy with a specific focus on state solutions for recruitment, retention, and regulation. Dr. Maxey has been a licensed dental hygienist in Indiana for over 20 years. She spent nearly a decade practicing in public health clinics operated by the Marion County Public Health Department prior to pursuing both a Master of Public Health and a Doctor of Philosophy in Health Policy and Management, both at Indiana University. Her experience as a practicing healthcare professional in public health clinics provides perspective on the critical role of health workforce. She serves as an expert consultant to the National Governors Association and has worked on issues ranging from health workforce data collection to policy design and implementation. Most recently, she has provided expertise for Indiana's Direct Service Workforce Plan. She is honored here today to be joined by her 15-year-old Sebastian in the row behind. Welcome to both of you to the hearing today.
Thank you, Senator Braun. Our third witness is Pam Lowy. Pam is the Executive Director of Great Bay Services. Great Bay Services is an organization dedicated to providing support for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So we thank her for her testimony. Our fourth and final witness is Jacinta Burgess from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, which is right in the south central part of our state in Dauphin County. Jacinta is a caregiver for her mother and a strong advocate for her mother's needs. She will share her experience as a caregiver. I want to thank Jacinta for being here today, and also want to thank your mother, Stephanie, whom I met earlier, and your brother, William, who are in the audience. We're grateful for all of you being here today. Before I turn to our first witness, I wanted to mention that some of our senators will be here asking questions and appearing virtually, not in person, and that's something that we provide an opportunity for. And I know that Senator Gillibrand is appearing at the hearing today in that fashion. So we'll start with our first witness and then proceed one after the other. We'll start with Dr. Scales.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Casey, Ranking Member Braun, and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify on the importance of investing in the home care workforce and supporting our communities of care. It is an honor and a privilege to be here today. As noted, I am Vice President of Research and Evaluation at PHI, a national, New York-based nonprofit organization that works to transform elder care and disability services by promoting quality direct care jobs, including home care jobs, as the foundation of quality care. More than 2.6 million home care workers, primarily women, people of color, and immigrants, assist older adults and people with disabilities across our country every day. Because the population is rapidly aging, and because most of us wish to age in place, Nearly 1 million more new home care workers will be required by 2030. That's more new jobs in home care than in any other occupation in the United States. And yet, as Chairman Casey spoke about, we are facing a workforce shortage right now because home care worker wages are too low, employment benefits are inadequate, training and career development opportunities are limited, and these jobs are insufficiently recognized, respected, supported, and valued. Existing and potential home care workers are being forced to choose more viable employment opportunities in other industries, leaving home care providers struggling to maintain services and individuals and families without the support they desperately need. Investing in home care jobs is a critically needed strategy to strengthen and stabilize this workforce to meet ever-growing needs. And I use the word investing because it will pay off. First of all, raising wages for home care workers will lift these essential workers out of poverty and enable their economic independence. Currently, 53% of home care workers rely on public assistance like Medicaid and SNAP just to meet their basic needs. If we raise wages, we will substantively reduce expenditure through these and other public programs. And what's more, these jobs will become more attractive and sustainable, thus reducing costs associated with recruitment, turnover, and contract staffing. Second, by investing in a more stable, sufficient, and well-prepared workforce, we can better ensure home care continuity and quality, which in turn can prevent or delay more costly outcomes. In other words, if individuals receive the support and services they need when they need them, their experiences and outcomes will improve and the total costs of care, particularly to Medicaid and Medicare, will decrease. Third, family caregivers will benefit financially. We know that family caregivers, the bedrock of our long-term care system, experience significant employment challenges, often having to reduce their hours, forego promotions, or leave their jobs entirely. With more paid care available, family caregivers will continue to support their loved ones, but without having to compromise their economic productivity, financial security, and overall well-being. And finally, investment in the home care workforce, again, one of the largest but lowest paid occupations in our country, will stimulate consumer spending and support economic growth overall. A living wage will provide millions of workers with more income to spend on food, housing, healthcare, transportation, and other basic necessities, generating new jobs and building wealth in local communities across America. The Better Care, Better Jobs Act exemplifies the potential for federal leadership on this important issue. Through this legislation, states would be eligible for a permanent increase in the federal match for their Medicaid home and community-based services, or HCBS. This legislation is so important in recognizing the indivisibility of job quality, workforce stability, and service delivery. To receive the funds, states will have to regularly assess and update their reimbursement rates to fully cover labor costs and ensure that increases actually benefit workers. They will need to strengthen training and credentialing opportunities for both paid and unpaid family caregivers, and they could receive additional funds to build their consumer direction programs and related workforce. And they will be expected to evaluate and report on their success, thus ensuring accountability and helping build the evidence base on high-quality, cost-effective home and community-based services. The Better Care, Better Jobs Act would be transformational, and it is not the only solution. We also need to enhance equity, as Chairman Casey was speaking about, by putting HCBS on equal footing with other long-term care options across states, as promoted by the HCBS Access Act. We need to test new approaches to workforce recruitment, retention, training, and advancement, and scale up those that achieve the best value. We need to ensure that home care workers and family caregivers have access to paid leave so that they can afford to take time off without sacrificing their employment, and more. Now is the time to embrace these solutions for the benefit of everyone who has a stake in strong communities of care, which is every single one of us. Thank you very much. I look forward to questions.
Dr. Scales, thanks very much. Dr. Maxey.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for your time, Chairman Casey, Senator Braun, distinguished members of the committee. Time waits for no man. The issues of the aging are the issues of us all. I applaud the committee's commitment to supporting the communities of care for our honored aging citizens. As Ranking Member Braun mentioned, my experience as a healthcare professional and a workforce researcher are broad and have extended more than 2 decades. I am here today as a health workforce policy expert to speak to the solutions that states are developing and implementing to build and strengthen their home and community-based services workforce, or HCBS workforce. I'm delighted to be joined by my son, Sebastian, who's currently working on his Eagle Scout project back in Fishers, Indiana, and is deeply interested in American government. In the balance of power between the federal and state governments, states oversee policy and programming related to workforce development, occupational regulation and public protection, and social services. All of these have a direct impact on the HCBS workforce. Keeping a finger on the pulse of related state efforts is critical to understand the national landscape and ensure policy alignment, from the halls of Congress to our state general assemblies, and ultimately within the homes of our seniors. I'm delighted to have provided research support to my home state on the Indiana Direct Service Workforce Plan. This initiative is a foundational part of LTSS reform in Indiana, seeking to enhance access to HCBS services. Indiana is one of numerous states that have engaged in planning to develop and strengthen this workforce. Many of the strategies I will discuss today are a part of Indiana's plan. Also, I would like to note that although these strategies may be beneficial for the private sector, my research and expertise on these matters is focused on state solutions. HCBS quality metrics recently released by CMS are appropriately focused on member experience. What is not in writing is that achieving many of these metrics hinges upon the availability and dependability of a competently trained workforce. HCBS workers require certain skills to care for our honored aging, regardless of whether that worker is employed by a provider or a self-directed consumer. Training standards support a minimum level of quality. Some states have developed portable credentials for individuals that have met training standards. Frequently, these are implemented through registries for qualified workers. Portable credentials empower workers by demonstrating their training achievements and facilitating their pursuit of economic opportunity among new employers, in new settings, or through additional academic training and stackable credentials. Empowered workers power our economy. Training registries can also empower employers and self-directed consumers by enabling them to verify that a worker has achieved training standards prior to entering into arrangements. When coupled with incident reporting and high-fidelity investigation processes, state registries can also protect the public from bad actors. Self-directed consumers and employers alike can query these registries to ensure that a worker does not have any substantiated abuse, neglect, or exploitation claims against them. In addition to consumer protection, registries offer states an opportunity to collect supplemental information on their workforce. Such information is useful for workforce assessments, targeting development initiatives, and evaluating the impact of these initiatives. Indiana is a leading state in this space, recently having leveraged such information to identify and strengthen career pathways for the facility-based direct care workforce. Wage is commonly cited as the greatest challenge to the HCBS workforce recruitment and retention. State Medicaid programs are the single largest payer for LTSS services in the United States, but the true cost associated with our public LTS services are even greater when we account for the many HCBS workers who qualify for and receive public assistance such as Medicaid, SNAP, or TANF based on their income. Recognizing Medicaid's influence over HCBS workforce markets and wages, many states, including Indiana, have developed targeted initiatives to enhance wages and benefits. Such strategies include competitive rate setting, wage pass-throughs, and value-based incentives. A conundrum within these discussions is the impact that wage enhancements can have on worker benefits. As I just mentioned, many HCBS workers receive public assistance. Strategies which increase wages to just over public assistance qualification can negatively impact overall income. This is commonly referred to as the benefits cliff. States are exploring where these cliffs exist to ensure their solutions are data-driven and have a net positive impact. I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to brief you on the great work going on in Indiana and states across our nation to uplift older Americans and the workforce that is supporting them. Thank you also for your leadership on this topic and your commitment to supporting and advancing state solutions.
Dr. Maxey, thanks for your testimony. Ms. Lowy, you may begin.
Thank you, Chairman Casey, Ranking Member Braun, and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify on the importance of investing in the home care workforce. In particular, I want to recognize my home state senators, Senators Shaheen and Hassan, for their support of Senate Bill 100, and Senator Hassan for her co-authorship of Senate Bill 1437, who are watching this remotely. My name is Pam Lowy, Executive Director of Great Bay Services, a provider of home and community-based services along the northern coast of New England. Our organization was founded in 1954. We started the first New Hampshire school for children with disabilities, opened a training center to provide employment for adults with disabilities, and helped close down the last New Hampshire institution for disabled citizens. We serve adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities, such as those with Down syndrome, autism, and cerebral palsy. This population is low income, most with co-occurring mental health diagnoses, most commonly depression and anxiety, and 60% of whom live with caregivers over the age of 60. My own brother, David, is a Great Bay Services client who lives at home with our 89-year-old father. We facilitate the independence and personal fulfillment of the people we serve, putting a lot of time, thought, conversation, and effort into what each person considers to be a meaningful day. For some, this includes working, in which we support them. For others, this includes volunteerism. My brother David, after volunteering at a soup kitchen, at the ASPCA, or greeting returning service people at Pease Air Base, always tells me, "I helped today. I'm proud of myself." Caregiving is essential work, and that work is only accomplished with skilled caregivers. However, we are experiencing a significant shortage. One reason is the wages for a caregiver. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology Living Wage Calculator estimates the living wage for an adult with one child in our region is approximately $35 per hour, working 40 hours per week. The current wage we are offering direct support professionals, or DSPs, is $16 an hour, and the majority of the supports we offer are contracted by Medicaid for a maximum of 30 hours per week. DSPs live paycheck to paycheck. When their vehicle needs repairs or they have out-of-pocket medical expenses, they have to make some very difficult decisions. Because our supports and workforce are such an integral part of our clients' daily lives, going fully remote even for a short time at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic significantly affected their well-being. One program participant's mental health suffered so greatly that he was hospitalized. Others needed emergency one-on-one supports to ensure they wouldn't experience a similar breakdown. As executive director, I have found myself repeatedly in situations where I've had to make the ethical choice, raising wages and mileage reimbursement despite Medicaid not covering the increase, temporarily closing programs after COVID exposures, and pray that it wouldn't bankrupt us. The average wage for DSPs in our region is $13 to $15 an hour. Even with a starting wage of $16, it's not enough at Great Bay Services. We continue to lose potential workers to other employers, and I am regularly forced to advise interviewees who state they cannot afford to accept my job offer that they would earn more working elsewhere. Staff in our field are financially struggling, barely making ends meet, but constantly agonizing over what would happen to the people we support if they don't come to work. DSPs in general tend to be older workers. Our average staff age is 46, with over 10% of our staff being 65 or older. Our longest-serving staff came to us straight out of college in the early 1970s and 80s. They have decades of experience in the field and decades-long relationships with our clients. The average wage for DSPs across the U.S. is not a living wage. One of our staff members confided in me that they had been homeless for their first few years in the field, struggling to raise a child on what was then barely above minimum wage. The ARPA funding Congress provided enabled us to pay tenure-based bonuses to our staff who stayed with us through COVID. One staff member cried in my office in gratitude that they could pay their oil bill as a result of that bonus. We were able to offer new hires bonuses as well as more robust trainings to all staff because of that increased funding. This has had an important impact on our hiring and retention, but it will not be a lasting impact. External financial stressors regularly impact the individuals we employ and can spill over into their work and their interactions with our clients in obvious ways, such as a vehicle breakdown, and less obvious ones. A stressed human support worker is less able to provide the empathetic, compassionate support our clients deserve. These DSPs are individuals from whom we expect a similar, if not higher level of skill compared to other positions which, unlike DSPs, have standard occupational classifications, such as certified nursing assistants, home health aides, and personal care assistants. DSP work is complex and goes well beyond caregiving, requiring skills including behavioral assessment and prevention, medication administration, and many personal and intimate caregiving tasks. I ask Congress to provide adequate funding for HCBS to keep Great Bay Services and organizations like ours from going bankrupt, and to keep our staff able to provide the necessary daily supports for Americans with disabilities. We make it possible to keep older adults and people with disabilities safe, stable, and in their homes, workplaces, and out in their own communities in which they play a vital role and where they prefer to be. Thank you for the opportunity to share my story, which is similar to that of thousands of providers across the country. I look forward to answering your questions.
Ms. Lowy, thanks very much for your testimony. We'll conclude our testimony with Ms. Burgess.
Good morning, and thank you, Committee Chairman Casey, Ranking Member Braun, and the members of the committee, for inviting me to speak today. My name is Jacinta Burgess. I am a home care worker from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I have cared for my mother, Stephanie, full-time for roughly 3 years. My brother is her part-time caregiver as well. I am honored that they are here with me today. We believe that the best way for our mother to receive care is at home with the people and things she loves. I care for my mother because she did her best to raise me. It's my duty to do my best to care for her now. But love can't pay the bills. My mother suffers from a number of neurological conditions, including essential tremors, which cause her body to involuntarily and painfully shake, sometimes for hours. Her condition also leads her to become confused. One time, she accidentally turned the stove's gas on and it leaked for hours. And before she stopped driving, she almost hit a group of children crossing the street. These experiences led me to start caring for her full time. I am my mother's eyes, ears, voice, and hands. As her caregiver, I make sure that she is living a happy, comfortable, full life while managing her illnesses and chronic pain. When my mom wakes up, I am there to ask her what she needs to start her day. She might need help bathing and getting dressed or a massage to relieve her pain. I help her with day-to-day duties that most healthy people take for granted, including opening doors, walking, getting into a car, cooking, or even pouring a glass of water. I am here to tell you that home care workers like me are struggling. The pay is not something you can live on. There are no paid days off. There's barely any training, and there are no medical benefits. When I officially became my mother's caregiver, I was paid around $12.39. Over the past 3 years, my wages have increased by just 99 cents. In 2023, with the cost of living skyrocketing, $13.38 is not enough for me or any working person to pay all their bills and live comfortably. My mother has to help me pay the rent and utilities out of her monthly Social Security benefits. If we didn't have each other, my mother and I would be homeless and struggling even more than we are now. Everything branches out from me. I am the head of the household with my head on a swivel. I am a queer, Black woman living in America, and I also have to worry about caring for a parent. Most mornings, I don't want to get out of bed. I struggle with deep depression and anxiety, but can't afford the mental health care I need to stay strong for myself and my mother. How is anyone supposed to enjoy their life if all they have to look forward to are the struggles they face? It may sound silly, but our cats are sometimes our only source of comfort. My mom massages my cat Shaka to calm herself frequently. I love our cats, but they should not be our support system. If I had a livable wage, I could live, not just survive. I could afford to buy a car so that we wouldn't be dependent on ride shares. I could purchase a home so I can afford the standard of living and stability I want for my family. Our current apartment has roaches and ventilation issues that make it hard for my mother to breathe. What keeps you up at night? I toss and turn worrying about whether I forgot to pay a bill, an auto payment overdrafting my account, and the condition of my apartment. I fight with a number of things I want to change so badly, but can't because of my lack of money and resources. There are so many care stories I could tell. Like my cousin Venetia, who requires 24-hour care but doesn't have a consistent caregiver, and they generally don't last for longer than a few weeks. There is a severe shortage of home care workers. Or my friend and union buddy, Janelle, who cares for her mother and struggles to find time to care for herself. But without Janelle, there's no guarantee her mother would be safe or cared for. For decades, home care workers have organized, advocated, and rallied for justice. My union, SEIU Healthcare Pennsylvania, has made a huge difference in my life. My union is a community of support and inspiration. I have a vision of America where long-term care is accessible, affordable, and consistent for all. We need our elected officials to champion efforts to make home care jobs full-time, respected union careers, and raise standards of care for consumers. I am important. My mother is important. My cousin Venetia is important. Janelle is important. And every care worker and care consumer is important. Thank you.
Ms. Burgess, thanks very much for bringing your personal story to this hearing. And I'll start my questions, my first question directed at you. Before I do that, though, I wanted to mention as well, we have, as I mentioned earlier with Senator Gillibrand appearing virtually, we also have senators who have appeared as part of this hearing, Senator Warnock and Senator Scott, Senator Rick Scott of Florida. And we'll have other, as I also mentioned, other senators coming in to ask questions as we go. So, Ms. Burgess, let me start with you. As you know, in many parts of the country, this workforce we've been talking about, the home care workforce that you're part of, is characterized by low wages, limited to no benefits, and high turnover. And that's just a brief summary. The need for more Americans to do this work is never been, I think, more apparent. You heard Dr. Scales mention, what is it, 1 million? We'll need 1 million people between now and 2030, not even a decade away. 1 million more people to do this work. Ms. Burgess, you mentioned in your testimony that you make $13.38 an hour, and I believe you said that had only increased by, what was it,
9 cents.
99 cents since?
I started in 2021, so it only increased at the beginning of last year.
So about a year. Going into the third year, I guess. The Better Care, Better Jobs Act would improve the compensation for workers such as you, and I think that's critically important. Paying home care workers a living wage is not just the right thing to do for that individual, it's the right thing to do for all of us. Because you can have good care if you have consistently low wages over time. It's also important for our economy. if we're going to call ourselves the greatest country in the world, the strongest economy, we got to have the best caregiving in the world. And we have work to do to achieve that. Ms. Burgess, what would a living wage mean for you? What would it mean for your family? And what do you believe it would mean for other care workers?
As I previously stated before, a livable wage would mean that I could own my own home instead of paying into a system that I feel disrespects me and takes advantage of me. I could own a car, pay car insurance, save money for a rainy day, take my pets to the vet instead of putting off their care. I could also assist my mother in her medical bills, and I could also pay my own medical bills and my own debts. It would make things so much better for not just my family, but other families in the care system. Home care workers wouldn't have to struggle so much, and they wouldn't have to stretch their money as far and wide as possible. They would no longer have to be living paycheck to paycheck without this cloud over their head.
And your work what comes with your work is a lot of stress, I imagine.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yes, a lot.
And I think we have to ask ourselves as Americans, would we want the person who's caring for us or caring for our mother or father or loved one, would we want that person to be someone who's paid a very low wage and has a lot of stress in their life? Think about that for a moment. Is that the kind of health care that we want for our country? I think most people would say the answer is a resounding no to that question. Dr. Scales, I want to keep my time because I'll be telling my colleagues to stay within their time, so I don't want to go over. But Dr. Scales, the legislation I've introduced would make a substantial investment in home and community-based services. This investment would directly improve the lives of older Americans and people with disabilities and help the workforce. Can you speak to how these investments would benefit the workers, also benefit American families more broadly, and our economy?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chairman Casey. For home care workers, I feel like Ms. Burgess has spoken to this truth so compellingly already, but these investments would mean the ability to really make a living while supporting the lives of others, ideally without having to rely on public assistance programs to make ends meet. That means the ability for job seekers across the board to be able to choose to do this work, for home care workers to be able to continue to do it over time, and to be respected and valued for that commitment. With regards to families, these investments would make a meaningful difference in the availability of paid respite care and ongoing assistance. And that, in turn, would support family members' abilities to manage their caregiving responsibilities without undermining their own jobs and careers. And it's important to say also that more paid support would also allow family caregivers to safeguard their own health and well-being, which would have positive implications for their ability to show up for their family members and in their jobs. And at the systems level, in terms of our country's economy, I will say again that I think that we can achieve net economic benefits from investing in HCBS and the workforce, because by spending more money upstream on these jobs and these services, we will see downstream savings in terms of reduced spending on public assistance, reduced spending through Medicare and Medicaid on more costly settings of care, and more contributions to the economy from these millions of workers that we're talking about. And I think the challenge really is here to just follow the money, to be able to demonstrate the systems level return on investment and strengthen coordination and integration where possible so that we do really realize that goal.
Dr. Scales, thanks very much. Before turning to Ranking Member Braun, we're joined by Senator Ricketts, mentioned a new member of the committee and new member of the Senate. Welcome, Senator, and Senator Braun.
Thank you, Chairman Casey. Back in Indiana, I know that we've got some institutions like Ivy Tech that has got a program to kind of upskill. I'm interested in getting your comments on that. And it looks like in our state, we're going to need about 14,000 more caregivers over the next 10 years. That's a lot. Whenever you can have skills upgraded, and I know career and technical education is an important thing. We're the biggest manufacturing state per capita, and we've got lots of jobs that are begging because we don't have those basic skills coming out of high school, where you need to kind of upgrade them a little bit in some cases. So I've got a bill out there, the Jobs Act, with Senator Kane, that would allow Pell Grants to be used for this type of training and certification. I'd like you to weigh in on how big a deal that would be to get these skills kind of upgraded. And then in our own state, we've heard the wage level, which does not seem to be a living wage. What is that stratification in Indiana for home caregivers? And by upgrading your skills, will the market pay a better wage if you're doing that?
Thank you so much for your question, Senator Braun. So with regards to support for training programs, cost can be a major barrier to individuals pursuing training and pursuing career pathways. As states are considering, including Indiana, developing and formalizing training programs, there will likely be costs associated with those. So any types of programs that can defray or reduce the barrier to cost to training that can qualify an individual for jobs, I think will hopefully go far to advancing and addressing our workforce shortages. Regarding wages in Indiana, I'd love to get you the formal information on where we stand today and kind of where we've been, and I'd be happy to follow up with that. I do believe that as we move towards in Indiana, and I know other states are doing the same, towards having some type of training standards, that those training standards, once an individual has them, they will be empowered to negotiate with their employers, also to seek out new employment opportunities. Ideally, we want people to be retained in their positions and roles, but we also want to empower people to find the best job situations for themselves. So I do think that we will see some advancement of wage through training.
How long have we had Ivy Tech devoting a special training towards caregivers in the home? How long has that been in our own state?
So that is, to my understanding, more recent, that Ivy Tech has been working specifically with the direct support professional training program with the state of Indiana, and we're really looking forward to see how that might be expanded to help support home and community-based workers in other settings, including with the aging.
Well, not only whatever you need in terms of extra skill enhancement. This is something, too, that I believe we need to take all the way back into secondary education, to where you're trying to do some of these things, because when it looks to be so many people working in a given arena, why wait until after high school to get with it? And this is going to become a bigger issue rather than a smaller one. So I think it makes a lot of sense that across this array of career and technical education, that we start giving it its due in high school, that we don't guide against it, stigmatize some of these pathways because they're needed. And as Ms. Burgess said, can't make a living on the wages that we're currently devoting to it. So to me, to solve this and really do it, it's got to occur way back in even middle school and high school, to where you start pointing out where the need is. And then if you need extra training after high school, fine, but try to get started back there. Yield back.
Thank you, Senator Braun. Now, next we'll turn to one of our new senators, and I know Senator Ricketts was here just a little bit before Senator Vance, but technically, Senator Vance has seniority. So,
He was here first.
he was here.
Wow.
So, Senator Vance, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Pete. I guess you should get out of my chair then. I should sit a little closer to the member there. Well, let me start here by offering a few thoughts. One of the things I worry about, of course, is that we have a really weird demographic situation in our country, and I apologize for coming late. I'm sure that we've discussed that issue a little bit. I'm sure it's something all of you are very aware of. But we have an aging society. Most American families are having fewer children, and if you play that experiment out long enough, what you end up with is a lot of people who are a little on the older side who need more care, and fewer people on the worker side who can provide that care. That's true whether you're talking about in-family care. That's true whether you're talking about nursing homes and so forth. So I guess where I would start here is, the job of caregiver is almost a saintly calling here. If you think about this, it includes a number of unglamorous duties. I'm sure I'm not telling you guys anything that you don't know there. It is a tough job in a lot of ways, and what my staff has found is some of the initial entry-level postings for these caregiving roles are something like $15 an hour, which is hard for a lot of people, even those who want to do healthcare to swallow. So they often don't appeal to Americans in the middle of their lives, and I don't doubt that these jobs are richly rewarding for devoted caregivers, but caregiver work can, of course, include duties such as bathing elderly wards, some of whom are suffering from dementia and may not remember who the caregiver is by the end of it. In short, this is a very hard and often thankless work. I guess the first question that I'd ask, given how stressed the industry is, and I sort of direct this to everybody, but is sort of how are the caregivers doing psychologically? We talk a lot about the economics and the statistics, but do you feel like the caregivers you guys are seeing, are they doing well? Are they happy? Are they feeling the stress? I'd love to hear your feedback on that.
As a home care worker myself and as a part of SEIU Healthcare Pennsylvania, surrounded by home care workers all the time, I myself am not doing well. I struggle with depression and anxiety. My friends often are struggling. My friend, actually, Janelle, she takes care of her mother. Her mother has dementia. She is often, emotional. Many people in this field are overwhelmed and often overworked because we don't have any other person really to rely on besides our families. And sometimes it's hard to get other home care workers to come in, depending on what area you live in, to relieve you of duty. So it's very hard.
Well, I appreciate that, Ms. Burgess, and thank you for what you do. And I'm sorry to hear that, but we certainly admire what you do. I guess maybe sort of one follow-up question then, again, to whoever on the panel would like this is, what do we do about this, right? I mean, if you have overstressed caregivers, you have a demographic situation that seems to be going in the wrong direction. It's going to get worse, it seems like, before it gets better, just because of the aforementioned issue. Let me just start actually a very direct question. Do you think the starting wages of caregivers are too low? That's a yes. Okay. What do you think, if I'm right that it's about $15 an hour, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, but what do you think the right number is here for entry-level caregivers to entice younger workers into this profession to begin with?
I can say for me, I only get paid $13.38. I don't make $15, and most of my union members do not either. Now, the starting wage would preferably be probably in the $20 range. I'll let someone else speak.
Sure. Thank you.
Can I add it? Oh, go ahead.
It feels a little bit like Price is Right. We all want to jump in with this question. I do wonder whether or not a lot of us have the same number in mind. I do appreciate the question, and as Jacinta pointed out, that where we're at right now is absolutely too low. I would say we're about $5 an hour behind where we should be for the skill level we're expecting. I have a beautiful graphic that was put together by the National Association for DSPs that shows the crossover between DSPs, LNAs, home health care aides, and these other positions. Generally speaking, their entry-level wage is about $20 an hour. So the fact that, we're paying $16, really trying to push it, trying to be staffed. But I'm sorry, Doctor.
To respond?
Please do. Yeah.
Okay. I would just add that the median wage for home care workers across the nation is $14.09 an hour. And really where we need to get to are wages that are livable, and there are calculations for that, which allow people to pay their bills, achieve economic independence, reduce reliance on public assistance, but also that are competitive to wages in other industries that are pulling from the same labor pool. Because to your point about the changing population, our changing population structure, we need absolutely more people to be choosing these jobs. And right now we are losing them to jobs that require the similar level of training and experience or even less. And what we see across the board in every single state, the median wage for home care is less than the median wage across these other industries that are offering sort of reasonably competitive jobs.
Thank you. And I realize I'm at the end of my time here, but I fear that we're in a bit of a spiral here, and we need to get out of it because, as I said earlier, the problem is going to get worse before it gets better. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Vance, thanks very much. Senator Ricketts, you're rewarded for your patience.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This obviously is a difficult situation. As Governor of Nebraska, this was something that we faced as well. I think just generally in the country between 2008 and 2018, we saw the number of people who were 65 or older go from something like 39 million to 52 million. And by 2060, I think that number is supposed to be 95 million. In Nebraska, in the last census, something like 16.4% of our population was above 65. And we've got about 200 skilled nursing facilities and assisted living facilities, and about 100 hospitals that also are providing different levels of care, the hospital providing different level of care to seniors. And the workforce shortage is one of the things that we hear from this industry as well as other industries. And I also think there might be some analogies here to the child care industry as well. But it is certainly a big challenge. We've had a number of our nursing facilities close in Nebraska. Certainly workforce is part of the challenge, but also one of the things I've seen is census too. A lot of times when we're looking at these, particularly in rural areas, when they close, they're at 50% census. They would have capacity to take on more people. So that's one of the other challenges we have. But when we're talking about licensures and things like that, that also kind of plays into this and the qualifications. Dr. Maxey, based on your research on how to better support caregivers, do you believe industry standards for training and credentials will remove employment barriers?
Thank you for your question, Senator Ricketts. So I'd like to be clear that I'm not necessarily stating licensing for HCBS or direct care workers, but rather some training standards that states can implement and then potentially coupled with training registries. I do feel as though training standards will empower those workers. They will have set skills. They will be able to demonstrate those skills to their employers. And I do believe that that will help to retain people in these jobs, as well as help put them, those that would like, on a trajectory for career pathways, whether they're in healthcare or some other related field.
Also, Dr. Maxey, I think there's about 30 states right now that require agencies to obtain a personal care license, and licensure across states vary. Is there a state that you believe should serve as a model for others to follow? And you're talking about training versus licensure. Is there, again, somebody you'd point to and say, hey, this is a state that has done it well. Maybe it's not licensure, but maybe it's training. Just talk to me about kind of what has your research shown as far as like who's doing a good job of this?
So, states are all very unique. And so I would say that their strategies range. And I would like to clarify, licensing of agencies would be different than licensing of the specific workers. So there are numerous states that license these agencies, and then the agency is responsible for training the workers and maintaining their own training activities. There are other states that actually have the training provisions in statute and implement those in varying ways. I would be happy to get back with you with some very specific information on the states that take those different approaches and what it looks like within them.
So, but is there a state, though, that you can point to and say, hey, this is a state that seems to be addressing the issue better than other states with regard to workforce and how to provide care and that sort of things?
I would say that based on my work right now, there are states across the nation, and pretty much every state is looking for solutions. And again, they really truly vary based on what a specific state's environment is and how their home and community-based services are structured. I would hesitate to say one leading state in these spaces. I'd rather provide you with a list of those that are taking these different approaches.
Okay, and just out of curiosity, just again, Nebraska, we have urban areas, we have rural areas. Typically, where we've had problems with nursing homes closing has been in our rural areas. Is that similar for Indiana as well?
Yeah, rural areas definitely are having more extreme workforce challenges. I can't necessarily speak to agencies and facilities because I work more on the workforce side, but I can definitively tell you that rural communities in Indiana and rural communities in many states are grappling with these same issues.
Great. Thank you very much. I yield back, Mr. Chairman. I note that I actually made it in on time.
Did.
Unlike my colleague here.
You get free Pennsylvania candy for that. Thank you, Senator Ricketts. Senator Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a kid, one of my favorite trips was going to Hershey, Pennsylvania, so remember it well. Thank you to all our witnesses for being here today. Dr. Scales, I hear from employers across Arizona how challenging it is to find direct care workers. And I know this is not unique to our state, but the need is serious. Nearly a fifth of Arizona's population is over the age of 65. The University of Arizona in our hometown of Tucson projects that our state is going to need about 55,000 more direct care workers by 2030. It's not too far away. And we've seen our providers come up with some pretty creative solutions to try to get by and continue providing high-quality care for Arizonans. In Tucson, high school students are getting engaged in career and technical education programs in the caregiving space. And our public university system is working to build out online curricula to provide frontline workers with a base level of geriatrics training that they can translate into their everyday work. And we're trying a variety of different things in the state. But one idea I'd like to focus on is viewing direct care as an opportunity for long-term career growth. That's what might get the high schooler excited about becoming a certified nursing assistant. And it's not only to work as a CNA in your high school program, it's getting the opportunity to grow in a field where you can make a difference in somebody's life and see your income increase as you advance professionally and build a meaningful role in our healthcare team. Now, you've done some research on this, on career advancement models in direct care. So what does your research tell us about the most effective ways to grow direct care as a career path?
Thank you for the question, Senator Kelly, and thank you for all of the exciting work that's happening in Arizona around training and career development for this workforce. I think what's really important is that for the most part, when we think about career advancement for direct care workers, we often think about it as moving up the nursing ladder, so moving from a direct care role to a licensed practical nurse or a vocational nurse and to registered nurse. And that's a really important pathway. But the step from being a personal care aide or home health aide or even CNA to that next step on the career ladder, that can be a really big step in terms of the time it takes, the financial resources required, educational experience, and more, especially for workers who are juggling multiple jobs and family caregiving responsibilities as well. So I think we need to think about how to bridge that significant gap and also create advancement opportunities within direct care as ends in themselves. So that's what we really are looking at PHI, is how to build out these different advanced roles that can be stepping stones or can be really richly rewarding career steps in themselves. So we're looking at senior aide roles, condition specialist roles, peer mentor roles, and transition specialists, all different kinds of roles that that take the core competencies of direct care and elevate them with additional training and responsibilities and earning potential as well. And just to give you one quick example, we pilot tested an advanced role called the Care Connections Senior Aid role in New York City with home care agencies and a managed care plan. And through this program, home health aides were elevated to a salaried position, and in that role, they coached the full home care workforce team. They helped manage sort of more acute caregiving challenges, and they served as a recognized role on the interdisciplinary care team. And what we saw through our demonstration project was that that made a meaningful difference in terms of client-patient outcomes, as well as job satisfaction for those involved, and reduced caregiver burden. So it's really, I think our challenge is there are these innovations happening in the field, and our challenge is really to invest in them, evaluate them robustly so we can look at replication and scale up.
Are you gonna scale that pilot program?
It has a lot of potential, yes.
And what can the federal government do to help?
Well, that's where the federal government could really take a role in identifying and supporting some of these innovative efforts, really looking kind of across the types of models, geographies, conditions involved, and so forth, so that we can really do a cross-section of robust testing in order to build the evidence base for what we really should invest in going forward through a sort of more structural means like payment streams and so forth.
Thank you, Dr. Scales.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Kelly. Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank our chairman. As I'm sure everybody here and everybody listening knows, he has been a steadfast champion of home health care. I've been proud to support many of his efforts, including the American Rescue Plan Act, which was hopefully transformative in making the kind of significant investments that he has led and others of us have supported, because one of the most important investments we made was in the Medicaid home and community-based services section, providing states with a 10% increase, as you know, in federal home and community-based service dollars if they expand and strengthen and enhance these services. I think these kinds of investments and incentives have enormous payback. They're truly an investment with tremendous dividends, and I hope that we will continue funding these kinds of services. Last month, I was honored to join SEIU 1199 in Connecticut to help kick off their Support Long-Term Care Workers campaign. And I want to mention this union because I think, in fact, organized labor and unions are so important in representing home health care workers in urging us to do better by them so that they can do more and better for the people they serve. That union proudly represents 26,000 workers. Think of it for a moment, 26,000 workers in Connecticut, including home care workers who fight for the people they care for, not just themselves, but people they care for. It seems clear to me that an investment in healthcare workers, especially at a time when there are shortages, lack of training, and burnout, that's an investment in the people that they serve. I know that Senator Casey has asked Ms. Burgess about a true living wage and how it would impact you, and your story is powerful and heartbreaking. I wonder if the panel could speak to the importance of training as well as proper compensation.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. My name is Hannah Maxey. I'd be happy to take that. So I'm sure you're aware that CMS has finalized a set of competencies for HCBS workers, but those serve more as a guidepost to states, whereas in other occupations or facility-based settings, there are stronger guidelines or regulations regarding that. Training standards are critically important for these workers and can help support a consistent level of quality and service across the different consumers that they might work with and the different settings that they're in.
And I wanted to say thank you for that question. In Pennsylvania, we just recently won funding for paid training programs, first of their kind in the state, which just rolled out earlier this year. Caregivers who have never received any healthcare training are now getting certified in everything from CPR to dementia capability care, nonviolent crisis intervention. It's very important, to have that training so that we know what we're doing on the spot. Even when I think of the care that I give my mother, her care is going to progress. She's going to need more, and my knowledge needs to grow. So the training that we would be provided would be life-saving.
Very important comment. Thank you. Thank you all for your service.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. I know we're going to have to wrap up soon. I might have one more question. Senator Braun? One more, okay. I wanted to turn to Ms. Lowy. I know that you shared your organization's experience providing care during the COVID-19 pandemic. As we heard, direct support workers went above and beyond to provide essential care during that crisis, often at great risk to their own health and their own safety. And too often that wasn't recognized. We didn't highlight that. We do know that in the American Rescue Plan, we allocated $12.7 billion in dedicated home and community-based services funding for states to address the urgent needs caused by the pandemic, including supporting the workforce. And we know this was kind of a short-term investment. We've also noticed that a lot of states have used those dollars to begin to build more of a foundation for home and community-based services. So tell us, what would it mean to recruiting and retaining HCBS workers when those rescue plan dollars are expended?
Thank you, Senator Casey. Sustained federal investment in HCBS would enable us to raise wages. With the ARPA funding that we received, we were able to give bonuses because it was a short-term investment, but we weren't able to have a sustained investment in raising wages. That obviously is the foremost challenge in recruiting and retaining staff. We'd also like to offer a career path for DSPs with skill and responsibility linked raises. Obviously, as both of the doctors have talked about, it's so important to have these additional skill sets fostered and that training funded. But at present, because we don't have any titular or financial recompense available to staff members who are interested in these additional training avenues, it's difficult, even if we had the funding for the training, in order to encourage folks to pursue that. And I also wanted to mention that there are we need to be able to provide these career paths for young workers, and our industry at present is not able to offer it. And in addition, these specialized training avenues that we could offer people, DSPs could specialize in things such as memory care. A lot of people don't realize that 50% of adults with Down syndrome develop dementia by the age of 50. And so that's an area we would love to be able to train staff in, but the motivation isn't there if we're not able to give them a career path in that direction. Obviously, also program development is very important. Just as for teachers or social workers, one size does not fit all for the folks that we support, so being able to develop challenging programming. And then finally, I wanted to mention that transportation and transition services are two areas that vary greatly from state to state, from underfunded to non-existent. So those would be two areas I would love to be able to invest more in. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Senator Braun?
Thank you. My final question is going to deal with something I did in my own company roughly 15 years ago when I was sick and tired of hearing how lucky I was. Premiums are only going up 5 to 10% each year. I took the entire system, kind of turned it on its head. We were able to self-insure, but that made a big difference once we became the insurance company when I found out how much profit they were making on our plan back then. But a cornerstone was to really emphasize prevention and wellness, giving all the tools to my employees to become engaged healthcare consumers, owning their own well-being. I'd like Dr. Scales and Maxey to weigh in on, can we weave prevention and wellness into whatever the model is to keep the elderly more healthy, to where you lighten the load for the caregivers that are already overburdened? Can that work even as you are already old? I know it works when you can catch all this early on, and it's kept us, you won't believe the results, we've not had a premium increase in 15 years. So we've fixed it by taking a different approach. Wellness, ounce of prevention worth a pound of cures. Go ahead, Dr. Scales.
Thank you. I absolutely agree that the more that we can provide opportunities for individuals to safeguard their health and wellness throughout their lives will make all the difference as we get older. I absolutely think we need the structural conditions in place to enable people to do that, and that means having health insurance, being able to seek preventive care or address issues earlier rather than later in their trajectory. And what I would add is that question to me brings up the importance of the home care workforce, because so much of what home care workers do is enable people to maintain their optimum health and well-being, to maintain their functionality, to stay active, to stay engaged in their communities, all things that actually will keep them on a better healthcare track for longer, rather than having to go without those needs being met and ending up sooner in the hospital, in the emergency department, in a nursing home before it's really necessary for them to be there, and so forth.
Dr. Maxey.
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to bring it back to training, but maybe instead of formalized training, home and community-based workers or even informal family caregivers need to be equipped with the information to help support the individual they either serve or their loved ones in what prevention is. That might look like a registered nurse that cares for that individual at their medical appointment, providing some health education to the caregiver. I think there are many ways that can happen, but I absolutely think that the caregiving workforce, either the formal employed or the informal, can absolutely be a part of supporting prevention and wellness for individuals that are receiving home and community-based services.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Braun. I will now turn to our closing statements, and we want to again thank the witnesses for their testimony. As we heard today, investing in the direct care workforce will have major economic benefits for many Americans. Studies have repeatedly demonstrated that paying home care workers will improve the financial security of those families, both the care recipients as well as the workers. And an investment in this workforce will boost the economy in communities across the country. It's not a surprise that every state, every single state, participated in the American Rescue Plan Act HCBS program to provide more funds to bolster home-based services. The rescue legislation had about $12.7 billion, and every state took advantage of that. So we must build on the investment now and certainly in the future, and fortify a workforce that helps millions of Americans live better lives, safer lives, and more independent lives. Ms. Burgess and all the care workers are long overdue for a raise. And I noted in your testimony, Ms. Burgess, you said, quote, "It was my duty to care for my mother," and I think you summed up pretty well in your written testimony what this means for the worker. You said, quote, "I care for my mother because it's the right thing to do, and I would do so even if I weren't getting paid. but love can't pay the bills, so we depend on the wages I earn for this work, but it's not nearly enough to make ends meet," unquote. I think that says it all in terms of the challenge our country faces. So one of the bills that we should consider is the Better Care, Better Jobs Act, as well as the new HCBS Access Act, to improve the recruitment and retention of direct care workers and provide the home care supports that older adults need and people with disabilities need. The committee has received 10 statements for the record that support the need for an investment in these services. So be assured that every single American will either require long-term care services and supports or need to support a loved one at some point in their lives. So I look forward to working with my colleagues to address the needs of millions of Americans and their families in need of supports and services. I'll now turn to Ranking Member Braun for his closing remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Enjoyed the conversation. We always learn a lot. It's always having great witnesses that live it in the field each day. We're transitioning everywhere across America where we obviously got an underpaid workforce. We're trying to find that right solution. The problem obviously is going to grow. Nearly all countries are dealing with the same issue. For us, I think we're just at the cusp of it, just due to, population growth and the whole dynamic of where our country is headed. I think it's going to be necessary to look to what we can do here to make it easy. A lot of times folks look to the federal government, and I think we should be leading and set the general context. However, we don't mind our own house very well. For all the places that depend on this place, we're currently running nearly $1.5 trillion in deficits each year, and that's a roughly 30% of our budget. That's a bad business plan for all the folks that look to the federal government, where in the past, we've been there, but we've not done it by borrowing from future generations. So I think it's even more important for these solutions to probably be crafted in the states where the rubber meets the road, where all the action is happening, where most of the workforce training is going to occur, and make sure we find best practices there. I'm going to keep promoting legislation that is doable, that can get across the finish line. The Jobs Act that Senator Kaine and I are promoting, just to put more money into Pell Grants, or not more money into Pell Grants, but being able to use it for job training, stuff like that. And then I'm hoping that the entrepreneurs, the caregivers, all of you that do the work, the heavy lifting on the ground, keep weighing in on what you need, where you need more help, and hope this place gets its house in order to where it can do a better job, and make sure you push hard at the state level as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ranking Member Braun. And I want to again thank all of our witnesses, Dr. Scales, Dr. Maxey, Ms. Lowy, and Ms. Burgess, for your testimony, for being here today in person and providing us the benefit of your experience, both personal and professional. If any senators have additional questions for the record or statements to be added to the record, the hearing record will be kept open for another 7 days until next Thursday, March 16th. So we want to thank you all for participating in today's hearing, and we are adjourned.